One thing that many people are going to have to deal with on a basement project is tying in either a wall or any other structure to a steel frame or to a steel beam that's supporting a house. Some houses may have a wooden beam, but many have steel beams nowadays. In this case, I'm going to use this steel beam because of the drop in head height, and actually it's a good location to support a wall in terms of the layout. So because of the drop in head height and where that beam happens to run across the center of the house, it's a good place where we're going to partition our layout for the basement. Now, how to fasten that wall to the head plate, what we did here is we drilled 1/4-inch holes through the steel beam, and then after we located those holes, marked them to our top plate, drilled through the top plate, and then bolted the top plate to the beam using some hardware. In this case, I've used a screw, a 1/4-inch screw with a lock nut, a wide washer. You're going to want a wide washer on the wood, and then also a washer up against the steel beam. And we did that in a few places along after we located it, and that's got our wall very solidly, rigidly secured. One comment is you may want to drill your holes in alternating sides of the steel beam webbing. This is an I-beam, so you got the center of the steel beam, running right through here. So in this case, we drilled a hole in this view on the right side web, and over here we drilled a hole on the left side web. Now, is that absolutely necessary? Probably not, but it just means that you're spacing your support on each side of that steel beam. It just gives you a little more rigidity instead of having all your connections in one single line. Now, in drilling these holes through the steel, you need to use a drill bit that's going to be hard enough to be able to get through the steel and not bind up or burn up on you. This one I have a hardened steel bit, only a 1/4 inch. You really don't need it to be too thick. The thicker you go, the more difficult it is to drill through that steel. You also want to keep the drill bit somewhat cooled and lubricated. Drilling through steel is going to heat that bit up really hot. You don't really need to have cutting oil. If you have it, great. I just use a little bit of general purpose lubricating oil to keep that bit cool as I drill through the steel. Wet the bit a little bit before I started drilling, located, started drilling, would bite off a little bit at a time, bring that bit back out, let it cool off, put another little couple drops of oil on it, and make sure it's got some lubrication as it's working its way through the hole. If you try going wider than a 1/4 inch, even though it's a little bit bigger in diameter, you're taking off a significant amount of more material, and that bit has to do a lot more work, as does your drill. As far as the hardware, you see an example here of what I used. In this case, this is a little bit long, but used about a 2 1/4 inch long screw here by 1/4 inch diameter. Double nutted the end as I showed you previously, and I had several sizes of washers to use. When you're going up against the wood, you'd prefer to use a larger washer, but even against the steel you want to have a washer there just to be able to spread out the load a little bit. So on this wall I want to do a barn door. I'm going to have a sliding barn door. One of the problems I have is I have this steel beam underneath my wall, which is going to be part of my wall structure. The barn door, I'm going to need to have hardware up here to be able to fasten it and be able to hold that heavy barn door as it slides back and forth from this opening. It's about a 3-foot barn door we're going to have sliding against the inside of this wall. That hardware needs to be held up and supported. We really don't have a place to do that if we just left this to the open web of steel, so we needed some wood here. I took a 2x8 and trimmed it down. I had to trim it down a little bit so that it fit right in between this webbing and around the curvature of the way that the steel beam is formed on the I section. There's actually a little bit of a curve to it. So if you don't cut it down a little bit and give it a little bit of clearance here, and same on the top side, this wood is going to be riding right up against that curvature, not up against the flat part of the steel. So again, I ripped the board down just so that we got the dimension, in this case I think about 7.5 inches wide. Cut it so that it fit. Test fit it into place so it's nice and flush up against the steel. And drilled 1/4 inch holes through the steel and then also through this board. In this case, because I want my drywall to come up and be flush against this entire area, I countersunk the heads of these screws here, and we screwed them in across and bolted them to the other side. We also put some liquid nails behind this board, a little bead of liquid nails all the way across so that the board itself is now glued up against the steel itself, and we made sure we clean that steel so it's got a nice clean surface to adhere to. Looking on the other side, here you can see the hardware that we used. not such great lighting, but in this case I didn't have any other lock nuts available, so I just simply double nutted it and made sure that we tied it up real nice and tight.